Hi there. Today's topic is, are you always cold? And the importance of why we want temperature adaptability in our bodies. I am Katie Lush, the creator of Lush Living. I'm coming to you live from downtown Chicago at Chicago River North Pilates, the studio that I teach and work out of and own. So thanks for joining. So my air conditioning went out this week. This is basically the reason why I chose this topic. I think it was Monday night, I came upstairs to give the kids a bath, and we were like, why do we care? Why do we want our bodies to adapt to temperature changes? Well, there's this very interesting study that happened a while ago. You can probably look it up, and it talks about brown fat versus white fat. And if you're not familiar about what that is, brown fat is a type of fat that's stored in your body, and it apparently has more mitochondria in it. And then white fat, also stored in the body, does not have as much mitochondria. So babies have a lot of brown fat. That's why they're actually able to adapt to temperature regulation a little bit more easily, I think, than compared to adults. Kind of a gruesome study, but it was on burn victims. And as a result, they had found out that burn victims actually had more brown fat in their body as part of the recovery process. So it makes you wonder, like, is brown fat actually something preferred and something that you would actually want more of in your body? Because it sort of proves that that type of fat, it has more mitochondria in it and potentially allows your body to be more adaptable to temperature changes, right? A fire being sort of like the most extreme version of that. So I personally find in my world and in my clientele that the women tend to run very cold. That's just an overarching theme. Or if they're like through menopause, they get the hot flash, they get very, very hot and then kind of cool back down. But I'm always asked to cool the thermostat down. Everybody wants it to be colder than sort of what I prefer, but I'm not the mover. Fair. And then same thing, you know, I live in Chicago. It tends to be very cold in the wintertime. People always complain about the cold, whatever. So why would it be important to actually need our bodies to adapt to temperature change? Well, I experienced it on Monday where I had to sleep in about an 85-degree room and the fan was on me. I slept on a very light sheet. I wore a tank top and shorts, but honestly, I was really uncomfortable. I woke up about 3 times and I just realized that my body is not accustomed to really what the outdoor temperature is to sleep in. I'm used to walking around in it, which is really interesting. I'm outdoors a lot every day, walking to and from the train at like a minimum. So I'm accustomed to how to adapt to that variation, but sleeping is a whole different beast because it's 8 hours-ish of your day, and that's a significant amount of time to be in a particular environment. And if you camp, obviously, that would be sort of the perfect scenario of when you would actually experience this, but I don't camp. So I guess the question is like, is it important? Do we even need it? And why? Why would it even be of importance to our body? So I think becoming temperature adapt as a body is a skill just like anything else. It's a skill just like working your biceps. It's a skill just like stretching and building more mobility and flexibility. Building adaptable tissues in our body, climate regulation is just another skill. So think of it as just like another form of exercise, which is a little different because I think people just say, oh, I run cold, and then that's sort of where they live for the rest of their lives. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that when we're kids, for the same reason that kids always kick off their coat when they're running around playing, they're hot, right? Their bodies have adapted to the temperature. Their internal furnace is kicked on because they're running around playing. They don't need the coat. The parents always try to put the coat on, but the kid has an internal sensation of, I don't need the coat. I'm fine, I'm warm. So from that standpoint, as a parent, I've made a conscientious effort to ask my children, like, do you need this coat? If they say no, I respect that. I bring the coat with me and I keep checking in. Do you need the coat? You still okay? Like, but at the end of the day, they're in charge. And this is like my 6-year-old. So I understand a 2-year-old would be a little different, but this is my almost 6-year-old. He knows what his body needs. And I always say, you're in charge of your body. It's just like all these, movements out there of sort of like taking control, taking our power back. When a parent is forcing a child to wear a hat, scarf, gloves, and a coat when the child does not feel like they need it, I respect that. And I say, you know what? You know what your body needs. You're fine. If you come in and you say that you were really, really cold, so be it. Then we'll change it for the next time. So I do it as a form of respect for my children. I let their bodies tell me if they're hot or cold because they can actually regulate their system better than I can. And then for myself, I try to not assume what I need. And what I mean by that is, so let's take today, for instance. It's probably in the 70s. It's going to be up in the 80s. I'm wearing summer gear. I've got a short sleeve shirt. I've got a tank top underneath. So I have options. I know I'm going to be in air conditioning, so I like to have something on my arms a little bit because it's chillier in the studio. And like I said before, we have to always crank up the air because people tend to be kind of hot in here when they're working out. But if I go to step outside and walk around for a period of time, it's probably warmer, so I can peel off my shirt and I can just walk around and have my day. So I have options for myself. But it's more for in the cold weather months where we get into this like winter uniform of we have our jacket on, our jacket because it's cold. We have our hat, we have, our mittens, we have our scarf, and it becomes this like almost an automatic response of I'm going outside, so I'm putting all this on. And I guess the question is, when you first step outside, you don't actually need those things because your body's probably still warm from the internal temperature of your home or office. So when you first step outside, you actually don't need any of those items. It's when you're in it for a prolonged period of time, the ears start to get cold, maybe your fingertips start to get cold, then you almost feel like that's when you should start layering up those items. So for me in particular, in the winter time, I have an extra bag or I throw it in my backpack and I have my gloves are in the pockets of my coat, scarf and hat in the bag, and I start to walk to the train. And then when I can't bear it any longer, then I take the hat out, then I put the gloves on, and then I keep going. But I don't just assume I automatically need them. I wait until my body gets some adaptation of the cold. It gets a little accustomed to the cold weather. I wait for my body parts to, cool down. Then I add the layering of the warm, devices or technology. Because at the end of the day, the reason we can't adapt to temperature changes is because of technology. And I don't mean this. I don't mean like me talking to you through like a Facebook Live on your device. I'm talking about the temperature gauge over here and my thermostat of my technology of air conditioning. So I know Paris has been really, really hot recently. And guess what? There is not a lot of air conditioning in a lot of these very old buildings because they just can't, right? They can't add the air conditioning later on. So what do these people do? That's the perfect reason of why we need our bodies to be adaptable to different temperature changes, right? So whether your AC goes out, it's an extremely hot day, you're used to a certain temperature and you can't have that for any particular reason. Maybe you're stepping onto a bus and there's no air conditioning, or your AC goes out in the car on the commute home. It's little opportunities like this, like we teach our tissues how to adapt to temperature changes. I think the biggest thing is that when people travel cross country and there are such big swings from temperature changes, I think that's when the largest what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, it's not necessarily a shift, but it is an adjustment. It's an adaptation, right? So if I'm going from, you know, Chicago to like maybe Palm Springs, California, you know, that's a big temperature change, especially if we go like in February, which I typically do. So my body was not meant to hop in an airplane and travel to the desert and all of a sudden be, you know, in 80-degree weather. So air travel has also taught us, you know, not to be able to adapt to these swift, you know, regulation or changes in our bodies. So, and same thing even with car travel, because I can drive probably from here to like maybe St. Louis and it could be a 20-degree temperature shift depending on the time of year. And so again, my body's just not accustomed to doing it. It's probably accustomed to having walked a long period of time, and then the temperature gradually adjusts, and then my body naturally gradually adjusts. So I always think when people say things like, you know, when the temperature does a swift swing, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna catch a cold or I'm gonna get sick. And I think it's just the body's response to not being adaptable and not being able to change to these fluctuations. So there goes a siren. If you run cold, I think probably two things are actually sort of the culprit. One, well, let's talk about why. Why is it? So one of it is just, you're not used to it. You just don't put yourself in cold environments regularly enough to build that adaptation. Fair. Nobody really likes to be cold. It's about being uncomfortable. People don't want to be uncomfortable. Maybe it hurts. Maybe you're arthritic and being in the cold is actually painful to your body. All fair, right? But then when you're always running cold, just understand it's not just the way that you were built or put together. It didn't just happen overnight. It's because you are not putting yourself in cold environments on a regular basis. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the overarching of why it happens. So I guess the question is like, if you want to improve this, if this is important to you, is it important to you to be able to have sort of robust tissues and adaptable tissues to, you know, various temperature changes? Personally, I do. I think that as a being, I think that it's just a healthier way for our bodies to be. Like I said, it's a skill, just like anything else. So being able to fluctuate from temperature changes and not be like, oh, it's so cold or oh, it's so hot. And I can feel it, but my body's able to respond to it. I think that's really important. So ways that you do that, kind of like what I just talked about. I have a layering system with clothing, right? So I know I'm indoors, so I'm gonna be cold, but I'm gonna step outside, I'm gonna be hot, I'm gonna peel off a layer, that cools me down. That's an option. But it's more so of just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, right? And I think a lot of this restorative exercise, natural movement stuff that I am such a big proponent of is really about taking yourself out of your comfort zone and putting yourself in scenarios that are uncomfortable and making that a deliberate decision with the intention that it's actually making you sort of a stronger, more robust, healthier individual. Yeah. Same thing with like walking on natural surfaces, natural terrain. A lot of people are scared or skittish, or it's uncomfortable in their feet at first, but maybe you're making a deliberate decision to choose to actually walk on natural terrain because ultimately it's giving your foot more mobility, maybe some more strength as a natural result, and then your whole body as a whole becomes a little bit more robust, right? And I don't know about you, but I turned 40 this year, and it's very important for me to actually age gracefully for the next 40 plus years of my life. So to me, being able to adapt to temperature is just one more thing I want to work on. So I'm going to layer my clothing. I'm going to keep putting myself in uncomfortable situations. Like, it's funny, when the air conditioning went out and my husband's first reaction was to immediately go down to the basement where there was air conditioning, I agreed to it. I thought we could all sleep in the same room. My daughter, who's 2, had other, motives of she just wanted to keep talking to everybody and she couldn't sleep. So that was the motivation of taking her upstairs. But there was a piece of me that thought to myself, can I sleep upstairs? Is that even a possibility? Is it okay? Is she gonna die? No, she's not gonna die. It's 85 degrees. People sleep in 85 degrees temperatures all the time and they're alive to talk about it. And she's young and she's robust, right? Like, her body is actually able to acclimate to this probably better than mine. So ultimately she needed to sleep in her own bed if I needed to get her to sleep. So I put her in a tank top and shorts, like very little clothing. I probably could have put her naked. It would have been fine. put her in her crib. She didn't grab for her blankets at night, and that was her just adapting to what she needed. So then I felt like I needed to sleep upstairs with her on that same floor just so that I could check in with her in case if something were to go wrong or she were to cry or whatever. So I slept in my bed. I wore very little clothing, like a tank top and shorts. I had a very light outer sheet because I like something on my body to sleep. And I made this decision of I'm gonna sleep up here and I'm just gonna put up with it. And we're just gonna see what happens. I didn't die. I didn't have my best night's sleep ever. But I do think that it was just like one step forward to challenging my body and its robusticity. Ooh, is that a word? Robusticity. That might be a word. And just challenging my body to be, a little uncomfortable, but with the greater good of potentially making my tissues stronger ultimately. So right now in the studio, I currently have the AC turned off because personally, I don't love to have it. I mean, I don't like it to be super hot in here, and I know it gets humid, and I understand that, but if there's opportunities of when you're in your car, you can turn your air off. Open your windows, let that fresh air come in, even if it's a little bit warm or a little bit cool. When you get into a car or an office or your home and it's always like 72 degrees all day, every day, and then you go to your next location, it's 72 degrees all day, every day, and you go to your next location, it's always 72 degrees, how can your body adapt to that? It can't. And so you're going to have to find ways to actually bring that into your daily life. If that's, something that you want to bring, that robusticity, right? That skill set to your body. I feel like I rambled a lot. Hopefully I didn't. But ultimately in the end, it's about, putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, scenarios, in order to actually have a little bit of a stronger, better body. And I think ultimately to allow it to age more gracefully. Yeah? Can I get a yes? All right, so hopefully you learned something. Temperature adaptability, blah. It's one of those days, right? Mercury's not in retrograde, but it kind of feels like it still is. If you learned something, let me know in the comments. Feel free to ask questions. I love chatting with you guys in this community. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me at the Katy Lush, KatyLush. That's my handle. You can find me obviously here at Lush Living. And my website is KatyLush, KatyLush.com. And I'm gonna write a blog about this because I think it's actually kind of important of just knowing that you have options, that we're not innately always one thing. We're not born and we come out always cold. We're not born and come out always hot. That it just has a lot to do with personal preference and adaptability. Right? All right, well, thank you for joining me. I will be here next Wednesday at around 2-ish. I started a little early today because I had some cancellations in my day, but try out your adaptability. Try to get outside, try to kick off your air, try to change your clothing habits, and just see if any of those things actually bring more robusticity to your body. Thanks again. All right, take care. Bye.